She thought she was untouchable, used to power privilege and getting her way. But when she pulled out a stun gun and attacked a royal guard expecting him to crumble, she made the biggest mistake of her life. What happened next left the entire crowd in stunned silence. Here's how it all unfolded. But before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Also make sure to check out our second channel, Guard Patrol, linked in the pinned comments, because we upload daily at the same time on both channels, so subscribe to both and never miss a powerful story. The sharp click of designer heels echoed across the courtyard of Buckingham Palace as Victoria Blackwood strode through the gathering crowd of tourists. Her Armani suit, a steel gray pencil skirt and matching blazer over a crisp white button-down, spoke of corporate power, while her perfectly coiffed blonde hair and blood-red lipstick completed the image of executive sophistication she'd spent years cultivating. "Excuse me," she commanded rather than requested, her voice carrying the practiced authority of someone used to making CEOs jump at her beck and call. "Some of us have actual business to conduct." She shouldered past a family trying to take photos, her designer briefcase swinging dangerously close to a child's head. The morning sun caught her diamond tennis bracelet as she checked her Swiss watch, a gift from her boss that she made sure everyone knew about as executive assistant to Marcus Sterling, CEO of Sterling International. Victoria had grown accustomed to a certain level of deference. Doors opened for her. People stepped aside and the world generally reorganized itself to accommodate her presence. After all, she was more than just a secretary. She was the gatekeeper to one of London's most powerful businessmen. "This is ridiculous," she muttered loud enough for nearby tourists to hear. "Don't these people have jobs? Or do they just spend all day gawking at buildings?" Her perfectly manicured nails drummed against her briefcase, a nervous habit that betrayed the constant tension thrumming beneath her polished exterior. A young mother pulling her children out of Victoria's path earned a particularly venomous glare. "Control your offspring," Victoria snapped, smoothing her skirt with practiced precision. "This isn't a playground." The mother's apologetic smile only seemed to irritate her further, as if basic human courtesy was an affront to her elevated status. Victoria had just rounded the corner of the palace grounds when she first spotted him, the royal guard standing at attention, his scarlet uniform a stark contrast to the ancient stones behind him. Something about his posture, his unwavering discipline, seemed to catch her attention. Perhaps it was the way he stood there, completely unbothered by the chaos around him. Or perhaps it was the fact that for the first time that morning, she'd encountered something that didn't immediately acknowledge her presence. Her eyes narrowed as she took in his ceremonial uniform, the gleaming brass buttons, the towering bearskin cap. A small smile played at the corners of her perfectly painted lips, the kind of smile that had preceded the dismissal of countless subordinates who'd failed to show her proper respect. "Well," she said softly, adjusting her blazer with deliberate precision. "This should be interesting." The morning sun cast her shadow across the courtyard stones as she began moving toward the guard, her heels striking the ground with the rhythm of approaching thunder. She paused a few feet from the guard, her head tilted in calculated assessment. The morning crowd of tourists flowed around them like water around stones, some already sensing the brewing confrontation and creating a subtle distance. "I saw that," she announced suddenly, her voice sharp enough to make nearby visitors turn. "Don't pretend you weren't looking." The guard remained motionless, his eyes fixed forward with practiced discipline. Victoria's perfectly plucked eyebrows drew together, unused to being ignored, especially by someone she considered beneath her station. "Excuse me." She stepped closer, deliberately entering his line of sight. "I'm speaking to you. I saw you watching me." When I walked past, the accusation hung in the air, as false as her designer eyelashes, but wielded with the same precision she used to destroy careers back at Sterling International. An elderly couple nearby exchanged concerned glances. The woman whispered something to her husband, who shook his head slowly, his stance suggesting military background, but Victoria was too focused on her target to notice the growing discomfort around her. "This is exactly the kind of unprofessional behavior I have come to expect from ceremonial staff," she continued, her voice rising with practiced indignation. "Standing here ogling women as they pass by, thinking your uniform gives you some kind of immunity." Each word was carefully chosen, shaped by years of crafting. Complaints that could end careers. The guard's composure remained unshaken. his bearing perfect despite her accusations. This only seemed to fuel Victoria's mounting irritation. She wasn't used to her words bouncing off their target like raindrops. "Off Marble, do you have any idea who I am?" She stepped even closer, her expensive perfume invading the space between them. "I am the executive assistant to Marcus Sterling himself. One word from me and your superiors will be explaining to themselves." To people who actually matter in this city, the morning sun had climbed higher, catching the brass buttons on the guard's uniform. Their gleam seemed to mock Victoria's attempts at intimidation, reflecting back only her own increasingly frustrated expression. "Look at me when I'm speaking to you," she demanded, her voice taking on the edge she usually reserved for deflecting unwanted calls from her boss's wife. "Or is that too much to expect from someone who's basically a human mannequin?" The guard's eyes remained fixed forward, trained on some distant point. Beyond the growing spectacle, his discipline was clearly professional, born of serious military training. But Victoria saw only defiance in her world. Anyone who didn't immediately respond to her demands was committing an unforgivable offense. "Still nothing to say for yourself?" She opened her designer briefcase. The leather so fine it probably cost more than the guard's monthly salary. "Perhaps we should document this behavior. I'm sure the palace would be very interested in hearing about guards who spend their shifts harassing female visitors." The elderly man with the military bearing had moved closer, now his wife's restraining hand on his arm. Other tourists were slowing, their pace some stopping altogether, drawn into the orbit of Victoria's manufactured drama. But like planets around a dark star, they kept there, recognizing the dangerous energy radiating from her rigid posture and clenched jaw. "This is your last chance," she announced, her voice carrying the same tone she used when informing young executives they'd never lunch in the city again. "Acknowledge your behavior and apologize, or this becomes official." The threat hung in the air like thunder before a storm. But the guard remained as unmoved as the palace walls behind him. Victoria's perfectly manicured nails dug into her palms, leaving crescent-shaped marks that matched the shade of her expensive lipstick in all her years of wielding power. Through proximity, she'd never encountered such complete immunity to her influence. It was more than just defiance. It was a challenge to everything she believed about how the world worked. Her eyes narrowed as she reached into her briefcase again, this time with more deliberate purpose if authority wouldn't work. "Perhaps it was time for a more direct approach. I demand to speak with your superior." Immediately, Victoria's voice sliced through the morning air. "Since you're clearly incapable of basic professional conduct, let's take this up. The chain of command." She pulled out her phone, its diamond-studded case catching the sunlight. "I have the chief of Metropolitan Police on speed dial. Shall we see what he thinks about this situation?" The guard's disciplined stillness only served to feed her growing rage. His perfect posture and forward gaze felt like a personal affront to her authority, an authority that had grown bloated from years of playing gatekeeper to London's elite you. No, she circled him like a predator, her heels striking the stones with increasing force. "I've terminated careers for far less than this. Just last week I had a senior VP removed from the board because he failed to stand when I entered the conference room." She paused directly in front of him again, and he was actually somebody important. The elderly veteran who'd been watching stepped forward, his bearing suggesting decades of military service. "Madam, perhaps you should stay out of this," Victoria snapped, not even turning to acknowledge him. "Unless you'd like to explain to my boss why his morning meeting was delayed because of harassment by PAL staff." The threat was empty. She had no meeting, no real purpose here except feeding her own sense of power. But threats had become her native language. She moved closer to the guard, close enough that her breath disturbed the metal on his chest. "Let me explain something to you." Her voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "I control access to one of the most powerful men in London. People who cross me tend to find their lives becoming very complicated." The morning crowd had grown, forming a loose circle around the unfolding drama. Parents guided their children away, while others watched with a mixture of horror and fascination. Two palace security officers had noticed the commotion, but were still assessing the situation from a distance. Nothing. Still nothing. Victoria's voice rose again, edged with genuine anger. "Now, what kind of man stands there and lets a woman accuse him of harassment without defending himself?" Or is this what passes for bravery? In the military these days, hiding behind protocol, the veteran's wife had joined him now, both watching with the grim recognition of people who'd seen this type of entitlement before the woman whispered something about service and respect. But Victoria was too focused on her target to hear I could end your career with one phone call. She continued her composure, cracking further with each word that failed to provoke a response. One call to the right person, and you'll be directing traffic at construction sites for the rest of your service. She pulled out her phone again, fingers hovering over the screen. Shall we test that theory? The guard remained motionless, but there was something in his bearing now. Not fear or anger, but the kind of patience that comes from facing real threats in real combat. This was a man who had probably seen action in Afghanistan or Iraq, who had faced enemies more dangerous than an entitled executive assistant with an inflated sense of power. This is exactly what's wrong with this country, Victoria announced to her unwilling audience. We maintain these outdated traditions, these ceremonial toys, while the real world passes. You buy in the time you've stood here playing statue. I've probably approved deals worth more than your entire regiment's annual budget. She reached into her briefcase again, this time retrieving a small leather case. Perhaps we need to escalate this situation. Make it impossible to ignore. Her fingers traced the edge of the case. Something dangerous glinting in her eyes. One last chance. Soldier, acknowledge me. Apologize for your behavior, and we can end this professionally. The guard's silence felt like a physical thing now. A wall of discipline that her words couldn't penetrate. Victoria's hand tightened on the leather case, her knuckles whitening with barely contained fury. The morning sun had reached its full strength, casting harsh shadows across her face that seemed to reveal something ugly beneath her polished exterior. Very well, she said, her voice dropping to a deadly calm. Let's see how well your famous discipline holds up under real pressure. Her manicured fingers began to open the case, revealing the metallic gleam of something that had no place on Palace grounds. Last warning, Victoria's voice had taken on a different quality now. Something sharp and dangerous that made several onlookers step back. You can't hide behind protocol forever. The veteran couple had moved closer, recognizing the escalating danger in Victoria's bearing. The old soldier's face showed the gravity of someone who'd seen that particular look before. The moment when entitlement tips over into something more volatile. You know what your problem is? Victoria's perfectly painted, lips curled into a sneer. You think this uniform, this ceremony makes you untouchable. She adjusted her blazer with her free hand, a gesture meant to remind everyone of her own position of power. But let me tell you something about power. Real power. It's not about standing still and looking pretty, it's about making things happen. She pulled out her phone again, this time, with exaggerated slowness. Shall I call the palace administration, or perhaps we should go straight to the media? Palace guard harasses female visitor. That would make quite a headline, wouldn't it? The threat hung in the air like smoke, acrid and toxic. The guard's composure remained unbroken, but there was a subtle tension in his bearing now. Not fear, but the ready alertness of a trained soldier sensing approaching danger. His eyes remained fixed forward, his posture perfect even as Victoria's threats grew more explicit. Nothing. She laughed, a harsh sound that carried no humor. Still nothing, even when I'm about to end your career. You stand there like a statue. Her free hand dipped into her purse, fingers brushing against the leather case. Let's see how well you maintain that famous discipline. When she paused, her hand encountering something else in her bag, the veteran's wife noticed her expression change, saw something dark flash across her features. Dear, she whispered to her husband, perhaps we should alert security. But Victoria was already withdrawing her hand, leaving the phone in her purse instead. Her fingers had found something else, the stun gun she carried for protection in London's rougher areas. A gift from her boss, along with a casual comment about how a woman in her position needed to be prepared for anything. You know what's funny? Her voice had dropped to almost a whisper, but it carried an edge that made nearby tourists instinctively back away. In my world, when someone refuses to acknowledge their superiors, we have ways of making them pay attention. The stun gun was small, matte black, expensive, like everything else in Victoria's life. She kept it concealed in her palm, but her posture had changed, becoming more predatory. The morning sun caught her diamond bracelet, as she shifted her weight, preparing for something that the growing crowd couldn't yet see. I've dealt with stubborn men before, she continued, moving slightly to the guard's side as if preparing to walk away. Men who thought their position, their uniform, their principles made them immune to consequences. Her lips curved into a smile that never reached her eyes. Would you like to know what happened to them? The veteran had taken half a step forward, something in Victoria's tone setting off ancient warning. Bells, his wife's restraining hand, tightened on his arm, both of them recognizing the look of someone about to do something irrevocable. This is your absolute last chance, Victoria announced, her voice carrying the finality of someone who'd made an irrevocable decision. Acknowledge me. Apologize. Show some basic human respect. She paused, waiting for a response she knew wouldn't come. No, still nothing. Her fingers tightened around the stun gun thumb, finding the activation switch with practiced ease. The small device hummed to life, the sound lost in the general noise of the courtyard. Very well, let's see how well your training prepared you for this. In that moment, the guard's military experience must have sensed the approaching attack. There was a subtle shift in his muscles, an almost imperceptible tensing beneath his ceremonial uniform, but his training, his duty, kept him rooted in place, maintaining his post even as danger approached. Victoria's next movement was sudden, precise, and utterly deliberate. The stun gun emerged from behind her back like a viper striking its metal contacts, seeking vulnerable flesh. Beneath the thick red uniform, her face showed no hesitation, no remorse, only the cold satisfaction of someone used to forcing the world to bend to their will. The morning sun caught the arc of electricity as it leaped from the weapon, carrying with it not just voltage but Victoria's accumulated rage at being ignored, at finding something her influence ends couldn't corrupt, at encountering a strength her money and connections couldn't buy. The stun gun's contacts found their mark, delivering thousands of volts through the guard's ceremonial uniform. For a fraction of a second, time seemed to suspend itself as Victoria's face lit up with vindictive triumph. But what happened next would shatter her expectations completely. The guard's body tensed as the current ripped through him, his muscles contracting involuntarily from the electric shock. The pain was immediate and intense, like liquid fire seizing through his veins. Yet instead of crumpling to the ground as Victoria had anticipated, years of military training and iron discipline took over. His jaw clenched until tendons stood out like cables beneath his skin, teeth gritting against the searing pain that threatened to overwhelm him. His feet, though trembling slightly, remained planted firmly on the stones of the courtyard, as if rooted there by something stronger than mere physical endurance. Not so stoic now, are you, Victoria hissed, maintaining the pressure of the stun gun, pushing it harder against his uniform as if trying to drive her superiority through his very flesh. The weapon hummed with malicious energy, but her moment of victory was about to turn to ashes in her mouth. With a control that defied both the electricity coursing through his body and normal human limitations, the guard's white-gloved hand shot out like a striking cobra. His fingers found Victoria's wrist with unerring precision, catching it in a grip forged by years of close-quarter combat training. The movement was smooth, measured, and devastatingly effective, not the ceremonial precision tourists photographed, but the lethal efficiency of a soldier who had fought hand-to-hand in the dust of Afghanistan. The stun gun clattered to the ground with a metallic ring, its arc of electricity dying with a final angry spark. Victoria's eyes widened in disbelief, her perfect makeup unable to hide the shock that drained all color from her face. The guard's grip wasn't cruel or punishing, but it was as immovable as the palace itself, his fingers applying exactly the right pressure to immobilize without causing pain. For the first time that morning, perhaps for the first time in her entire career, Victoria found herself completely unable to dictate the situation. How dare you? She shrieked, her voice rising to a pitch that made nearby pigeons take flight. She tried to pull away her designer heels, scraping uselessly against the ancient stones. Do you know who I— That's enough, madam. The guard's voice cut through her. Protests like a combat knife through silk, quiet, but carrying the unmistakable authority of someone who had faced Taliban fire and IED blasts. His eyes, when they finally met, hers held not anger or hatred, but something far more terrifying, the controlled power of a warrior who had chosen this precise moment to break protocol in those eyes. Victoria saw not the ceremonial statue she'd been mocking, but a man who had stared death in the face and hadn't blinked. The veteran couple had rushed forward through the stunned crowd, the old soldier's face grim, with the recognition of a situation that required immediate intervention. His own military experience told him exactly what he was seeing. Not just an assault, but a moment when ceremony gave way to the reality of what. These guards truly were highly trained combat soldiers. Palace security was already pushing through the gathering throng drawn by the commotion and the distinctive electrical discharge that every professional instantly recognized as a weapon that had no place on palace grounds. Victoria struggled against the guards' grip with increasing desperation, her carefully maintained composure shattering like thin ice. Her hair, perfectly styled just minutes ago, had come loose from its severe bun strands, falling across her face as she twisted uselessly against the immovable hold. "Let go of me. I'll have your job for this. I'll have your entire career." But her threats rang as hollow as her designer heels on the courtyard, stones empty as the stun gun that lay harmless at her feet, its metal contact still smoking slightly from the discharge. The morning sun illuminated the scene in harsh detail, casting shadows that seemed to emphasize the stark contrast between appearance and reality. The guards' uniform remained immaculate despite the attack, every button still gleaming, every crease still perfect, a testament to the discipline that ran far deeper than mere ceremony. Victoria's appearance had transformed dramatically. Her expensive suit was twisted and wrinkled, her silk blouse had come untucked, and her carefully applied makeup was smeared from exertion. The scattered contents of her purse lay strewn across the courtyard, stones like fallen leaves, credit cards, gold-plated compact designer, sunglasses, and various symbols of wealth that suddenly seemed as worthless as her attempts at intimidation had proven to be. "You just assaulted a member of His Majesty's Armed Forces." The older veteran stated, his voice carrying decades of military authority and the weight of justice about to be served. His campaign medals caught the sunlight as he stepped forward, each one representing battles fought in defense of the very principles Victoria had just attacked with a prohibited weapon on palace grounds. Each word fell like a judge's gavel, hammering home the gravity of her actions and the severity of the consequences she was about to face. Palace security had formed a cordon now, their faces showing the professional gravity of men who understood exactly how serious this situation was. Their eyes took in every detail. The discarded weapon, the scorch mark on the guard's uniform, the obviously expensive stun gun that spoke of premeditation rather than spontaneous action, but it was the guard himself, still maintaining his perfect grip on Victoria's wrist, who commanded the moment with the quiet authority of someone who had earned his position through fire and combat, rather than ceremony alone. "In my years of service," his voice remained measured, controlled. "Despite the lingering effects of the electric shock, I've faced insurgents in Helmand Province, survived eye attacks, and lost brothers in combat, and yet somehow you believed a stun gun would break what enemy?" Fire could not. Victoria's face contorted with rage, but beneath it, something new had appeared. Fear not of the guard's grip or the approaching authorities, but of the absolute control in his voice. The unshakable authority that no amount of corporate power could match. "I carry medals for valor under fire," he continued, each word precise as a drill instructor's cadence. "My uniform bears decorations earned in real combat, not ceremony, and you thought your entitlement would outweigh years of battlefield discipline." The veteran stepped forward, his own military bearing matching the guard's 2 tours in Iraq. He stated, addressing Victoria with cold precision, "That's what I see in his stance. The kind of discipline that comes from real service office, not the false authority you've borrowed from your employer's position." Palace security had formed a cordon, now keeping the growing crowd at a safe distance, while Metropolitan Police hurried across the courtyard. Victoria's struggles had ceased. Her designer suit now as disheveled as her composure. "The charges will be severe," one of the security officers announced, producing handcuffs, carrying a prohibited weapon on palace grounds, assaulting a member of the armed forces. He paused, looking at the stun gun still lying on the stones. "The Crown takes these matters extremely seriously. Do you have any idea what Marcus Sterling will do when he hears about this?" Victoria's voice had taken on a desperate edge. "He'll have your entire department "Shut down, he'll Mr. Sterling," the guard cut in his voice, carrying the same quiet authority served with the Royal Marines before building his corporate empire somehow. I doubt he'll look favorably on his assist attacking a uniformed serviceman. The color drained from Victoria's face as this new reality sank in. All her borrowed power, her assumed authority, her carefully cultivated connections, none of it could undo what she'd just done. The thing about real power. The guard continued, finally releasing her wrist as the police moved to take custody, is that it doesn't need to electrocute people to prove itself true. Authority is earned through service, sacrifice, and unwavering dedication to duty. Concepts I suspect are foreign to you as the handcuffs clicked into place. Victoria made one last attempt to salvage her position. "This is all a misunderstanding. I was defending myself from harassment. He was the CCTV cameras covering this area. The security officer interrupted have captured everything, every accusation, every threat. And most importantly, your unprovoked attack on a Queen's guard. I suggest you exercise your right to remain silent before you make your situation worse." The guard had resumed his post, his bearing showing no sign of the assault he'd just endured. His uniform remained impeccable, his posture perfect only, the slightly darker shade of his white gloves betraying the force he needed to use in restraining Victoria. 8 years of service, he said, addressing not just Victoria but the entire crowd, teaches you that real strength isn't about breaking others. It's about standing firm in your principles even when tested by those who mistake cruelty for power. As the police began leading Victoria away, her designer heels stumbling on the ancient stones, the veteran's wife spoke up. "Young lady." Her voice carried decades of wisdom. "You came here thinking you could buy or bully your way through life as always. Instead, you've learned that some things, dignity, duty, honor, remain beyond the reach of money or threats." Victoria's response was a stream of threats and accusations that grew fainter as she was led away, her carefully constructed world of borrowed authority crumbling with each step behind her. The guard stood at his post, his shadow stretching across the courtyard like an immovable reminder that some principles stand firm regardless of the forces aligned against them. The veteran and his wife remained for a moment longer, exchanging knowing looks before departing. "That dear," the old soldier was heard saying to his wife, "is why these men stand guard not just over buildings but over principles that some people may never understand." What do you think about this confrontation between entitlement and duty? Have you witnessed similar moments where borrowed authority crumbled in the face of genuine strength? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to like this video if you believe in standing firm against disrespect, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about the royal guards who serve as living symbols of dignity and duty. Don't forget to hit that bell icon to never miss our daily uploads. Check out our previous videos appearing on your screen right now, and stay tuned for our next story about another encounter that proves respect isn't just given, it's earned through unwavering dedication to duty.